Hi, folks. This is Dr. Rob Cywes, the Carb Addiction Doc, along with my wife Janae, the Carb Addiction Mom. And this is an ongoing segment in our series about our pregnancy. Um, and so this episode is about we get the news, we're pregnant. And obviously, we are high risk, our age, everything else. We've tried to mitigate that risk with a healthy diet and a healthy emotion management system and being physically active. However, there are still a number of forces, both genetic and age related, and travel related and stress related, that are against us. So we decided to keep the news very quiet and wait to see how things happen. But there was a biologic preparation that Janae went through and some misery from the pregnancy that we anticipated, but it wasn't, our anticipation was far less than the severity of some of the issues related to pregnancy. And Janae's going to tell that story as we go through, because I kind of take a backseat, a supportive role, but I'm not up front in the trenches. And I can tell you guys, always, always, always be thankful that God or nature did not choose us to be the carriers of babies. Thank God I'm not a sea horse, because male sea horses carry the babies. um, because I can tell you, watching this wonderful person, the strength that she's displayed through this is enormous. I'm not sure I could have coped.
I think he could have, but regardless. So we did, I guess by the time we found out, it was a little bit later. But when we calculated back, the date of conception was the 23rd of November. We found out several weeks later in January. And really, the first 6 weeks, I felt perfectly fine. In fact, that's why we didn't know for a
Let me
while.
just stop. Let me just stop you there. In a different segment, I'm going to talk about the science and the biology of embryology, which is how a child develops. But I just want to say one thing: 6 weeks. 6 weeks was the time we really knew that we had a viable pregnancy. By the time a fetus is 6 to 8 weeks of age, it is already pretty much fully developed. The heart starts beating at 6 weeks. So that is the window. If you have not given yourself adequate nutrition during that time, every aspect of that early embryology, that early biological development is negatively affected. You can't catch that up. You cannot catch that up. The liver starts working at 6 to 7 weeks. The heart is already beating. Those things are formed. They're working. They're functioning. You already have a human fetus at 6 weeks. Now, I don't want to get into the politics of conception, all that bullshit. I'll leave that for the politicians to discuss. But purely as a doctor, it is the first 6 weeks before most women know they are pregnant, because you only miss your period during that time, later during that time, and then you doubt things if you're not sure. It is those first 6 weeks that are critical in having a healthy baby, and you cannot take that time back. You cannot go backwards and make up for it. Critical. So therefore, plan your pregnancies and prepare your body, male and female, before you get pregnant.
Well, and if you're living the lifestyle like Rob always recommends, it shouldn't be an issue, right? You're already eating the way you should with the low carb, high fat. Hopefully, if you are trying to get pregnant, taking a prenatal vitamin. So there was no concern there that we missed that period because we knew we were living the very healthy lifestyle that he always promotes. So from that perspective, when we did find out, we were very excited and there was no fear, no concern about not having known during that period. But I think once we did actually get the confirmation, I think we added one more supplement in at that point.
Well, you'd already been taking that because we started taking this particular supplement way before. And um, as Janae said before, when we talked about the wedding with my hat, my brain is very small. So it is critically important, and I'm kidding around, but it is critically important for the early growth of the spinal cord, the spinal canal, the early nerve development, and most importantly for the development of the brain, to have adequate what we call substrate for that brain and create an environment where that substrate can actually get in the fetus. And that requires insulin sensitivity and it requires a low carbohydrate state with a high fat state. And the critical fats that are crucial, critical, vital, essential, we call them essential fatty acids, to the structural development of every cell of the baby, but particularly of the brain and the nervous system, are the 3 omega fatty acids and cholesterol. Yeah, cholesterol, that thing that kills all the adults according to the world out there. No, cholesterol and DHA and EPA, which are the 3 omega fatty acid substrates, are critically important. And even on a healthy ketogenic diet, you may not have enough. So it is critical that you find a healthy source of fatty acids before the baby begins to develop to replenish your own stores, and then continue with that over time. And the best sources are natural or wild caught small fish are the best sources. So we used a krill oil that I researched. It wasn't about what the manufacturer said. It is biologically what was best in there and how bioavailable it was. And not only is Janae on a high fat diet and a high natural fat, saturated fat diet to get as much of that in, she's also supplementing with DHA and EPA that is pure, that is free of any sugar or other contaminants. In other words, it is taken in a pure form, not in some shake that is sugary or anything like that, which the manufacturers love to teach you about. Oh, have the shake and we've added some crap to it. No, take it in its purest form. But the only other thing is, fat has to be consumed with meals. So it is critically important that you take your multivitamin, that you take your fish oil as part of a meal, not separately.
Yep. So I really did well in terms of the first 6 weeks. I felt perfectly fine. Like I said, we didn't really know. And then about 7 weeks through 16 weeks is where I started having some of the nausea. And I'm not going to call it morning sickness because it actually wasn't in the morning at all for me. It was really throughout the day, and it was exacerbated at night. So that was the point in time that was a little challenging for me because I was really having to force myself. And I'm sure lots of pregnant women have this same feeling that they go through where they're really forcing food down. But I had to really force myself to eat really at all, but especially in the evenings. So I was eating, and I also had an aversion, and I think I've read that a lot of other women have as well, to red meat, particularly steak, which is really strange because I love steak. Usually we eat a ton of steak and a ton of red meat, but I really had an aversion to that. It just turned my stomach completely. So I was eating a ton of chicken with the skin on, of course. Again, fat so important. Fish, pork. Throughout my pregnancy, I've been making a pound of bacon every Sunday. So actually today I still have to make my pound of bacon. And then I eat it, 2 or 3 pieces a day, every single day in the morning, with my eggs and cheese as well. And again, even eating in the morning at all is a hard concept for me because we're typically OMAD, and really we're leading up to this. But I knew I needed to really force myself to eat. So I've been eating a lot of bacon, eggs, cheese in the morning.
Maybe one of the principles that during that time when Janae had sickness that was called morning sickness, but it happened at variable times in the day, what she learned to do was normally we'd eat our big meal in the evening. That would be our one meal a day. However, now she said, okay, I'm going to take whatever opportunity I can where I'm not feeling sick to have my meal. So even though she was only eating once or twice a day, and I wasn't always eating with her, that was the time when she would eat. So she'd opportunistically eat when she wasn't nauseated. Sometimes in the evening when I'd be eating my meal, she felt terrible. So she'd sit with me, but she wouldn't be eating. And the other conflict, and this is a difficult keto conflict, is that being in ketosis makes you not hungry. That's the whole premise of weight loss on ketosis. So here we have someone in pretty deep ketosis having to kind of eat more. And we didn't quantify how much. There is no quantity. Your body kind of tells you. But at this time, your body's telling you don't eat. So the reality is in those first few weeks, Janae didn't gain a lot of weight. But we knew that what she was eating was adequate, number one. So big bang for buck that everything she ate and drank had value, nutritional value, and we also knew, and this is critical, is that she had money in the bank. She had prepared herself before getting pregnant by loading up on those multivitamins. And while you can't load up too much, at least her stores, her stock was in good supply. So on days when she didn't feel like eating very much, the baby could tap into very readily and seamlessly, so there was no blockage from insulin resistance, but seamlessly tap into some of her stores without depleting her long-term stores. So she didn't become malnourished during that time, even though she wasn't eating very much. And that is critical in the preparation. Anticipate the fact that you're not going to feel like eating. Find times when you can, figure out how to make it happen. But if you've got stores in place, you can survive that nausea. And by the way, what I love about this woman is she tolerated the nausea without going chemical on it. She did not use a whole bunch of drugs that a doctor offered her to take for that nausea. And while not everybody is going to have that kind of course, you may need some of those medications. The fewer of them you can take, the better.
Yeah, I wanted to stay away from all medications as long as it was tolerable. Luckily, it was for me. And
Let me just interrupt you for 1 second. Sorry. Because now we're finding out Zantac has been pulled off the market. Some of the proton pump inhibitors have all these cautions on them. We consumed them like candy before for reflux. And Janae does suffer from reflux, as she mentioned, especially when she's not on keto. So it was doubly traumatic. Not only was she feeling sick to her stomach, she was also having reflux. And yet, now we know that those drugs that people consumed with impunity, whether pregnant or not, have very, very serious toxic side effects. And this is not just me being sensational. Zantac and the H2 blockers are now off the market. The PPIs have huge restrictions by the very people that manufacture them. We know they are toxic. If you have to take them, do, but be very, very cautious.
So then after about 16 weeks, the nausea went away and I started to feel much better. So I've been able to return to a pretty, more on the carnivore side. I still do some vegetables, but it's been, I haven't had as much aversion to the red meats and things. So that's been nice to kind of get back to that. Feel great, have good energy. Again, still doing the physical activity and the emotional buoyancy type things. I know Rob's talked in the past on some of his videos about me being a big human connection person. I just really love people. I love to know about people and their stories, and I have a lot of great friends that I'm so very thankful for and an amazing family. So I really use the human connection every day to talk to friends, family, colleagues who I adore.
None of whom know about the fact that we're pregnant, by the way.
True.
This is news for them as much as it is for all of you.
Very true. So, so I'm still using that diversified emotional management toolkit that I have throughout this process, and that was really, really important during that sort of nausea period as well. And that really hit actually right when this coronavirus thing was just starting to begin in our country, really even prior to it beginning. But I was following it very, very closely, even from before it came to the United States, because I actually work a lot on the West Coast, and that was sort of the point of entry for a lot of it, and where we thought initially it was going to get very bad. So there was a lot of stress around that as well, because of course I was continuing to travel.
And working in hospitals, by the way.
Correct. And I had a lot of really important, critical sales activity going on during that period. So I was not feeling physically the best. My diet was changing just because of my aversions, not because I was being bad, but my aversions. And just a lot of stress with the virus, unknown pandemic, that we've never experienced before, and work stress as well. And the stress of just having found out we were newly pregnant and there was still risk there, where we knew there could be potential loss.
So one little thing that Janae mentioned earlier on is she spoke about particularly the carnivorous type food that she was eating. And I think one of the mistakes that we make in the world out there is saying, oh, red meat's bad for you, eggs are bad for you, oysters are bad for you, tuna's bad for you. No, they're not. No, they're not. And this is critical for everyone to understand. There's a caveat to that, though. real food that human beings should eat, any fish, any seafood, any poultry, any meat, eggs and cheese, are always healthy. They do not suddenly harm the baby because babies live in a ketogenic environment ideally. And that includes after they're born. So those foods aren't bad. Here's where the caution has to come in. The caution has to come in that certain fish, especially the predator fish, have higher mercury levels. That's not a fish problem. That's what we human beings did to those fish. So yes, be cautious about certain predatory fish because they may have a slightly higher mercury level. Eggs are not bad. Eggs are never bad. But if there's salmonella or other bacteria in the egg, that's where the problem comes from. Raw fish, raw oysters, for example, are not a problem. It's maybe the hepatitis that's in those shellfish that's the problem. So most diseases that occur in our food occurs because there are contaminants. Now, historically, one of the reasons why Jews and Muslims do not eat pork is not because there's some religious reason, but it's a cultural thing that a few thousand years ago, those animals carried the highest risk of disease, and we knew that that disease transferred to humans, so we stayed away from that. And then we created laws that adopted a religious perspective to stay away from certain foods, shellfish or pork for Jewish people and for Muslims, and we created certain laws around the preparation of the food, not because it was religious, but because it was socially protective of who we are. And at the same time, we now have to be very careful of where we get our food from. You don't want necessarily, if you're pregnant, to consume animals, be it chickens or beef or whatever it may be, that are been injected full of hormones. Probably not the healthiest. So if we can afford organic or grass-fed animals, far better. But it's not about the animals. The animals that we eat, we've always eaten. It has made us human. It's the contaminants that we humans have added to them or to their environment that is the problem. So that's where we have to be careful. But red meat isn't the problem. Eggs aren't the problem. It's the crap that we human beings add to them that causes the toxicity. So please be mindful of that. Sushi's fine, but you've got to know what you're eating. Not sushi. Sushi's got rice in it. Sashimi is fine, but you've got to know where that fish is coming from. So it's very important to understand that aspect. And yet so often the anti-keto folks use that as a weapon not to eat these foods.
So then that really brings me through that, stressful period, and maintaining all of those diverse ways of dealing with that stress was very important. And now we're sort of 6 weeks post.
Well, let me just stop you there for a second because that's not entirely true. Okay. We have also suffered, and again, everybody's done this, so it's not we're unique, but relative to other people that have been pregnant, for anybody right now, this is an unimaginably stressful period that we are not going to fully understand probably for a decade or so as we go back and analyze the impact of lockdown, the impact of the stress of knowing about COVID, particularly when you're pregnant. The increased risk that this virus poses. And I'm a doctor, I'm in the medical field. So if I bring that home, how does that work? So yes, we got over some of the early issues with the biology of being pregnant, the nausea, everything else. But within a month or two of being pregnant, now there's this huge burden psychologically of isolation, of changing up our lives. This is the longest time Janae and I have ever been under the same roof, by far, because of her travels and my travels. So we're having to learn to adapt our relationship, and it's been absolutely wonderful. And being able to live together, but also there's a lot of stress and strain. Today we're in late April. Janae hasn't left our home environment since the 2nd of March. So she left for one day to go and get some blood work and then came right back. So yeah, the stresses and strains are there, but they shouldn't be a cause for crashing and burning. They should be a reason to strengthen yourself. And you can put a positive twist on this and say, okay, what can I do? What can I accomplish during this time? Rather than, oh my God, this is happening, and become a victim to the anxiety and the stress that you see on TV every day. And the lack of support from some of our leaders out there of all different kinds to support us as human beings. Zero empathy.
So that's been a really important piece, is just maintaining our strong relationship, maintaining human connection with family. I know all of you are doing it right now. Zoom meetings with colleagues, WebExing, FaceTiming, whatever it is. Virtual happy hours, which our friends didn't know that I was actually drinking Diet Sprite with a squeeze of lime, because historically my drink was vodka soda with a squeeze of lime, actually multiple squeezes of lime. So just those little things, or, you know, between the two of us every day, how's your day? You know, even talking of the day's events, what news alerts we got on our phones, how things in this pandemic are changing. But those are all important pieces. And then, of course, our dog, as Rob said, Tabo has provided a lot of therapy, I think, as well. He's been on more walks than he's ever been on in his life, but he's just kept our family unit strong in this time of stress too. So, and he's a big piece of our emotional management. So that really brings us to the current date through this long journey that we've taken you on. So now I am 22 weeks pregnant. I've gained about 10 pounds. Again, for us, it's not, we never really talk about weight in our house. We talk about health, but I think some of the pregnant moms out there will be just curious about weight gain. So I've gained 10 pounds to date in 22 weeks, and I'm sure that will continue to grow. And everything is really healthy. And we just, as Rob said, got some blood work completed, which he can go through in more detail.
Right. In the next segment, I'm going to do that. I've got Janae's blood work right there from last week, and we will go through the changes in her blood work and the good things that have come out of that blood work in a state of pregnancy. So it'll be more of a scientific approach, but it is critically important that I think that anybody going through pregnancy needs to understand what those metrics are. And all too often, the OBs are testing for the toxic effects of the standard American diet and then trying to medicate their way out of it. Nobody is telling people not to do the standard American diet during pregnancy. In fact, more often I get questions as a pediatric doctor about, is keto safe? How dangerous is it? How bad is it? Here's the experiment, folks. Here's the experiment. If I did not absolutely understand the evidence and the science, and this isn't about belief, this is the best evidence, the best science that I can go with, and I'm trusting the application of that evidence and science on our family, both from an addiction perspective, from a mindset, from an emotion management perspective, as well as from human biology and embryology, development of a child, mentally and physically, that I'm entrusting my knowledge of the science and the pervasive knowledge of the evolution of humanity to apply to this baby. Are we going to have the perfect baby? Hell no. But that baby is going to be the best it can be given the circumstances of who we are as a couple. And I will share some of the blood work from Janae's blood work in the next episode. And we will also have some episodes as we go forward about autism, about some of the biological changes. The genetics are the genetics. And we both have certain genetic traits that would rather not have in our kids, but we have to be prepared for that. But thanks for watching. And we appreciate everything you do to spread the news, to spread this information, because we want humanity to maximize our evolutionary and genetic capability, not destroy ourselves with viruses and with carbohydrates. And the two interplay tremendously. We'll have a video on that as well.